Welcome, I'm Ijoma Honyato. Tonight, Acting President Yemi Osinbajo says the country's diversity should not be taken for granted as he meets with traditional rulers from the northeast. United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in West Africa frowns on rising number of refugees in Africa, calls for urgent intervention from governments across the continent. Nigeria's Health Minister Isaac Adewale says the country's approach to emergencies is a far cry from acceptable standards. And a United States jet shoots down an Iranian-made drone operated by forces backing the Syrian government in the south of the country. And on business news tonight, Nigerian Communications Commission and Central Bank to hold emergency meeting with the TISEL in Nigeria tomorrow over 541 billion naira debt.
Alan Sports News, Rivers United edged KCCA of Uganda 2-1 in Port Harcourt in the CAF Confederations Cup.
And from Abuja, the absence of an interpreter stalls the arraignment of suspected kidnappers of Turkish international school students.
President Professor Yemi Osinbajo says Nigerians should never take the country's diversity for granted, adding that we must wield that diversity not as a divisive tool, but a binding agent. In a series of consultative meetings against the backdrop of recent threats by the Arewa Youth Council, the acting president told traditional rulers from the northeast that to help counsel the misguided elements among the youths to think that ethnic confrontation is a game. He also reiterated that the federal government is fully committed to maintaining the unity of the nation and employing all apparatus of government necessary.
President Muhammadu Buhari spoke of his commitment to one Nigeria as arising from his experience in the military, where he fought side by side with Nigerians of every tribe and faith from the 60s in the Congo. He said, we protected each other, we put our lives on the line for each other. We were brothers even in the face of death. This is the type of nation that we must maintain. And as royal fathers and leaders, I am sure you will agree with me that we have a role to play in countering the voices of divisiveness. Let us continue to counsel the misguided elements among our youth who think that ethnic confrontation is a game and that words can be thrown around carelessly without repercussion. We must never take our diversity for granted, and I think it's so important for us to re-emphasize this again and again. We cannot take our diversity for granted. The fullness of our strength lies in that diversity, and we must wield that diversity not as a divisive tool, but instead as a binding agent. Our objective is to provide the environment for a prosperous nation, a nation where all, regardless of ethnicity or religion, can pursue their legitimate aspirations peacefully and securely.
Now, earlier in the day, the acting president had urged the private sector to invest on and off-grid renewable energy solutions as the government concludes plans to expand the solar home system program to 1 million households. He was speaking at a forum at the presidential villa where he announced that the government has concluded the first tranche of the 701 billion naira payment assurance system approved by the Federal Executive Council in March to break the gridlock in the electricity value chain. Our correspondent Gloria Umezuke reports.
For the first time, Wuna community in Gwagwalada Local Council saw light using solar energy. In January 2017, the acting president flagged off the Beyond the Grid solar power project in the nation's capital. Nearly 6 months after, Professor Osinbajo reiterates that promise, urging the private sector to boost investments.
We also continue to implement critical elements of our policy that will promote private sector investments in renewable energy, such as one, power production tax credits, PTCs. I hope that some of these will appeal to the private sector, and some of the comments I've heard about financing and financing some of these initiatives, and also encouraging the private sector participation through incentives. So the tax credits to electricity generation companies, which is aimed at incentivizing the adoption of renewable energy. Then we have the feed-in tariffs, the FIT, which typically incentivizes electricity producers by offering more favorable pricing for electricity produced through renewables.
The federal government is embarking on a broader restructuring of the electricity sector, hence the commencement of the second tranche of the 701 billion naira payment to free up the electricity gridlock.
It's also important for us as we go forward that we break the deadlock of the electricity market structures by exploring the options to transform, quote, the competition for markets approach. We need a framework that brings together all stakeholders towards ensuring that renewable energy becomes a real engine of growth for the Nigerian economy.
Arising from our projected population of nearly 1 billion people by the end of this century, in 83 years from now, it is clear that our domestic consumption of crude petroleum will continue to grow, and the time will come when domestic demand will exceed supply, so that we will no longer be an exporter of crude petroleum products.
No doubt the federal government is adopting a positive stance for its Vision 30-30-30 of 30 gigawatts electricity generation. Beyond the story of renewable energy and its potentials, it is agreed that the political will to invest and incentivize the private sector remains crucial to consolidate growth in the power sector. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
The Christian Association of Nigeria, Benue State Chapter, and Islamic clerics have called on the international community to hold the federal government responsible for any violent attack by herdsmen, following its failure to arrest the leadership of the Mayati Allah for inciting violence in the state. The groups made the call while presenting a protest letter to Governor Samuel Ortom for transmission to the acting president, Yemi Osinbajo.
As early as 8 a.m., a joint peace protest organized by the Christian Association of Nigeria, Benue State Chapter, and the Imam of Isala Mosque in Boko streams through the streets of Makudi, the Benue State capital. The destination is the Government House, where the protest leaders meet Governor Samuel Ortom to deliver a letter meant for the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo.
In 2014,
there was also a message to the international community that the federal government should be held responsible for any breakdown of law and order, having failed to arrest those inciting violence in the state.
We strongly call on the acting president, through you, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, to immediately order for the arrest of the president of Mayati Allah and charge them for inciting the herdsmen against our Benue people. If this is not done urgently, any breakdown of law and order and further destruction of lives and property by the Fulani herdsmen will be blamed on the federal government for not living up to its responsibility.
The Imam led the Muslim community in the same protest, calling for peace among residents of Benue State.
We have no any state like this Benue, because we were born in Benue here, we were grew up in Benue here. We went to school and then we came back. That's the reason we need everybody to stay in peace, law and order.
After listening to their prayers, Governor Ortom promised to deliver the message meant for the acting president.
We have given a transition up to November. It is expected that by November, no open grazing of any sort whatsoever in Benue State will be tolerated. That's right. I want to assure you that I will communicate to His Excellency, the acting president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Osinbajo, and give him the letter of protest which you have handed over to me.
It's been an uneasy period for residents in Benue State following threats and inciting statements by the leadership of Mieti Allah on May 31, 2017. The Fulani Association faults the recent anti-open grazing law in Benue State, describing it as obnoxious and a recipe for anarchy. The bill was signed earlier this month by Governor Samuel Ortom.
As Nigeria joins the Committee of Nations to commemorate the World Refugee Day, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to Nigeria and ECOWAS has frowned on the increasing number of refugees in Africa. At an event to mark the day, the UNHCR representative called for an urgent intervention by governments across the continent to address the issue of refugees and internally displaced persons. He also advises African leaders to address the plight of illegal migrants that die in the Mediterranean Sea and the Sahara Desert at the hands of human traffickers and drug traffickers.
The 20th of June every year is a day set aside to address the situation of people who are forced to flee their homes and sometimes countries to escape conflict, war or persecution. This year, the UNHCR representative to Nigeria and ECOWAS and the Vice President of ECOWAS decried the increasing cases of refugees in Africa.
There are around 20 million refugees and double that number of internally displaced persons in the world, half of whom are children. Nigeria is a case in point as the third largest humanitarian crisis globally. Also, the majority of migrants who have arrived in Italy in 2016 are from Nigeria.
Recent statistics indicate that 1 out of 124 people are refugees or IDPs. United Nations Refugee Agency UNHCR has estimated 65 million out of the 8 billion worldwide population to be refugees, asylum seekers, or internally displaced persons.
With more statistics from the Minister of Budget and National Planning on the number of refugees in Nigeria, the Federal Commissioner, National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons outlined ways of assisting refugees.
Currently, Nigeria plays host to approximately 1,409 refugees and 614 asylum seekers. Meanwhile, the Boko Haram insurgency has forced more than 180 Nigerians to flee to Cameroon, Chad, as well as Niger.
There must be better coordination with federal and state government interventions and the inclusion of the organized private sector to assist, amplify, and enhance the humanitarian response as it pertains to refugees.
Although the World Refugee Day 2017, according to the UNHCR, is taking place in the context of increasing displacement with over 20 million refugees and double that number of IDPs in the world, experts believe that this year's theme, "We Stand Together with the Refugees and IDPs," is very apt.